Just sent out notifications. This is Auto Hoax or GTFO by Chief Crow and the Flat Earthworms. Go ahead and share the stream. So check it out. An asteroid bigger than the One World Trade Center is going to speed by the Earth today. It's 911 feet long, 2,033 feet in diameter. And this is according to Newsweek. So, again, this is what I'm saying. We're looking at metascripting. We're looking at lies told to the public to prepare them for what's going to happen on the news in the future. This is a narrative structure that they've built for you. This is what I mean by metascript. So, for example, if you abide by the metascript of the Bible in a literal fashion, you might be inclined to interpret things within the biblical framework. If you're a climate change hysteric, every change in the weather will confirm your bias that internal combustion engines are causing fluctuations in the climate. So, what they're doing here is they're creating a cognitive bias that a 911 feet long and 2,033 feet wide diameter rock, the size of the One World Trade Center, no bigger than it. Like, why it? Why not bigger than any other building? Why did they name that? But anyway, it's going to kill us today. This is according to NASA, and you can't not trust NASA if you believe any of their baloney. If you believe that we have a rover on Mars that can take selfies, that landed there 12 years before selfies were a thing and somehow knows how to do selfies, if you believe all that, then you must absolutely believe this, and I expect you to be in your basement, in a fallout shelter, wearing a mask, praying or something, because I'm not afraid of meteors, because I don't believe in them. You have no excuse for not fearing meteors if you're part of this belief system. So if you believe in probes on distant comets and exoplanets and everything else, why aren't you ducking and covering? Like, I don't take this seriously. They said Kim Jong-il is going to nuke us on Christmas. Like, didn't happen. So I'm waiting. Where's your 911 foot long, 2,034 foot wide rock that's bigger than the One World Trade Center? They should just call it Allah Akbar 666. The other one, they called it Apophis 999, which it's like you might as well just call it whatever you want to call it. How about Satan's coming to kill you all? 42. So I don't believe it. There was a solar eclipse today. Thousands witness a rare ring of fire. You know what it looks like to me? It doesn't look like a ball in front of a light source. It looks like a disc in front of a disc. That's what it looks like. Okay, so let's continue. Again, we're supposed to be hit by a meteor, and I have to keep bringing this up. A couple of things here, in fact, tie together here. One, you can't not fear asteroids if you believe in them, because the precision that it requires for them to be able to say, yeah, that thing's 43 million miles away, and it's traveling at 7 million miles per hour, and it's 911 feet long and 2,033 feet wide, and we know it's going to hit us on Christmas Eve. Like, if they're so precise to even detect it, then how the hell can they ever be wrong about this thing actually hitting us? So I just find it really puzzling that the believers in space rocks don't take it all that seriously. It's like, it's your fear. You finance this garbage. It's the same with the climate change people. Why don't you guys give up your iPhones? If you believe in climate change, start walking. Give up your iPhones. Go move to a commune. Start healing the damage that you've done. You polluting, carbon-based life form. This is their ethos, and they want to impose it on us. And I'm like, no thanks. Keep your asteroids, keep your communism. But they're so selective about it. Like, I also think that if you're going to buy into this pseudoscientific paradigm altogether, spinning ball and everything, if that's your thing, then you must believe in and accept climate change as inevitable, as cyclical, as evidence, as evidenced by what the newsman, the weatherman saying, what Al Gore says, what Greta says. Like, how dare you not believe in climate change if you believe we're on a ball because it's part of the same system? I've been making the point that the people who don't think that God is judgy and hateful are cherry picking. Because if you take the Bible as a complete book in itself and to be taken literally, or mostly so, you have to accept that God has got a dark side, a judgy side, a genocidal side. You have to admit this. When you say, yeah, God's going to smite the sinners, what you're saying is, yeah, God's going to go 9/11 on this thing, but he's going to do it for real, and you're cool with it. And just so, I mean, like I said, it's part of the package. If you're a believer in the spinning ball heliocentric paradigm and everything that goes with it, guess what? You are officially a lukewarm believer, and you're cherry picking because you don't want to recognize that your globe has a dark side and that your actions will be judged. You see, it goes sins are punished, pollution is punished. It's not my mind control. I'm just pointing it out for those of you who still abide by this garbage. Stop being hypocrites. Like, why am I the only one here fear mongering about asteroids? Like, I don't believe in them. And all the people I know who believe in them don't take it seriously. And again, here's why. They want this to fill up your consciousness. Oh, you don't take it seriously. Not a big deal. It's just a joke. So then when it happens, the priesthood can stand up and say, we told you so. I mean, look, I've seen this many times. And take any doomsday cult, and there's nothing they want more than for the world to end for the people who aren't in their cult. So they can say, and this is a quote from a Mandela believer, Nana Nana Boo Boo. There's a guy who said, and he was a Mandela affected person, so he's basically transitioned across many different universes to get here. And he said, you know what, you mock us, you think it's a joke, but one of these days you're going to wake up and McDonald's will not have those golden arches and it's going to plunge your world into chaos. And we're going to laugh at you. Those of us who are early adopters to the Mandela effect mindset are going to laugh at you non believers and all say, Nana Nana Boo Boo. They actually threatened me with this. It's like, oh, how dare you not believe in the Mandela effect? Oh, this is another prophecy. If you want to believe in prophecies, which I don't, this is just meta scripting, but I did predict this. I said on the solstice there's going to be a massive UFO sighting on the western United States because it keeps happening. So 2017, there was an object, a UFO, sighted across the west coast. In fact, let me bring this up. Okay, December 2017, UFO. And this was pretty much, let me see if I can find it here, over Nevada. But it wasn't a UFO, actually. It was SpaceX, and it was in California. So SpaceX had basically said, here we go, December 24th, 2017. UFO, no, that is a SpaceX rocket. These Falcon 9 photos are just amazing. So if you remember this, it looked like a UFO. It looks like a lot of weird things. It looks like I don't even know what to call it. Like, I think the way people appeared to interpret this based on the live streamers who were playing this thing live and who were recording it from their phones, they were all saying it looks like it's going through some type of interdimensional gateway. In fact, I had some people actually suggest that to me. Like, they said, well, maybe the space program is actually super high tech and they're going to other dimensions. It's like, no, this is Elon Musk. This is theater. I mean, they sent it over California, where everybody, the people over there who are seeing this, they're outside, they're celebrating, weather's nice, and it's like a big light show. Chad remembers this. Good, good. This is 2017. But check this out. This is where I'm telling you this is meta scripting. So we'll go December 2018, UFO sighting. Same basic story. I did a story on it. I did a live stream called Recycled News. And there were a few, but this is the one I'm looking for. UFO sighting December 2018. There were actually quite a few, but this one was very high profile. And I think it was right on the solstice, so it would have been the 23rd, I believe. Yeah, there's quite a few here, but I'm trying to get the exact one. There's one that was like highly sensationalized, and they said it was a missile test. And my point is, these have happened around the solstice. And so this just happened again on the 25th or 23rd, actually. Multiple reports of UFO traveling 1,000 miles per hour over Vegas. So I'm just seeing a pattern here. And I think I know what the pattern is now. I think the pattern here is that this is tying into astrotheology like everything else. I've described this ad nauseum about how the Babylonian priesthood have replaced their obelisk with the rocket. And so the whole drama of the rocket and the night sky interacting is just an interplay of the earth god and the sky goddess and their daily reconception. It's a serial reincarnation of the sun god. Every day he dies and he's reborn. Anyway, I think that since they take everything basically from the Bible, which is actually from the stars, they take this astrotheological story and they encode it into the mainstream news via the space program. And basically, what we're seeing here then is this is the Christmas star that is signifying the birth of the Christ child, aka the sun. So it's a winter solstice ceremony that your magi in high places are performing right in front of your eyes. And even here, when people looked at this, people marveled at it. They oohed and awed at it. And it's like, well, that was the point. This unexplained light in the sky, where's it going? And of course, it's coming from NASA, which is really nothing more than a sort of like Hollywood. They have really high budget, but you wouldn't know it by their productions. But really, their job is to superimpose this ancient religion over this modern Jetsons utopia that they're projecting for us. But it's pretty consistent with the solstices, and that's why I'm bringing it up. And I do think it ties into this Christmas story, Christmas myth. Okay, so about metascripting. We're talking about the possibility of the space station going down. I know their toilets shut down right before Thanksgiving, and they've been wearing diapers in space ever since. They're hinting at it. Last year at this time, an astronaut dialed 911. Quote by accident, he butt dialed it. And then a cosmonaut with a drill poked a hole in the thing, which got people thinking sabotage. And right after the hole was poked in it, the Soyuz rocket aborted. And those two guys landed back on Earth, which put the ISS into a precarious position because without the boost from this Soyuz rocket, without the supplies or the personnel, they were questioning, well, do we need to let it down? They were talking about bringing the space station down last year, and um, at the end of the year, and I thought this would be the year because we're 33 years since the Challenger explosion. And that's just the tip of the iceberg here when it comes to the meta scripting suggesting that they're going to bring down the space station. And the other day we were talking about how from the very beginning the space race has been the hoax. Forget the moon hoax. It's the space race hoax that the conspiracy theorists that are hired by the government don't want you to know about. So let me go ahead and write this down. This all ties into this. I watched this documentary yesterday, and it's about something that takes place where I live. Like, actually, I walked by this person's house. Um, Former government agents are openly talking about how they were employed by the government to spread UFO conspiracy theories to cover clandestine technologies. So here's a guy who lives near an Air Force base, and he's watching what he thinks are unexplained, like basically UFOs. He's like, that's not human technology. I guess it was stealth stuff, but he was watching these things, and from his vantage point, he could see these craft taking off and going behind the mountain, on the side of the city where the public wouldn't have access to. And he recorded this stuff, and he started a conspiracy group about it, talking about UFOs, and he became very popular. And next thing you know, he goes to the Air Force Base and he says, I see what you guys are doing. There's some UFO activity. Maybe you're being spied on. And they listened to him and they didn't do anything. They just said, okay, well, you have a compelling case. So this UFO researcher has some type of a radio where he's trying to interpret signals from outer space. Well, the Air Force sends the NSA into a house across the street and they start beaming this guy messages about how they're from a planet like Earth that has run out of water and they're going to strike and take over and they're 100% hostile. So, what this alien researcher does is he basically thinks it's all true and he starts doing conferences and spreading the gospel and pretty much starts a cult of believers based on this transmitted information. And then, of course, later he met someone who was actually working for the Air Force, an agent, who said, I'm also a believer in UFOs. I've also cited them, and fed this guy a whole lot of misinformation. And the point was, they wanted to use this guy who saw too much to discredit anybody talking about any of these lights in the sky near this Air Force base by associating it with this ridiculous UFO alien type stuff. And the point of it is, after several years, they pretty much ruined the guy's life because he took it so seriously and he was being reinforced. And the whole time, this was a government sanctioned COINTEL operation targeting one individual. They actually sent him into a mental institution at the end of it. But listen to this, the government has known for decades of an alien invasion and has been funding sci fi movies to prepare us for war. Like, that's the type of story he was told. Like, yeah, the government is involved in this, the government knows it's real, and they made this guy into some type of like a whistleblower or something. And one other point I found interesting about this, and you can find it free on YouTube, it's called Mirage Men. One other point, the hotel conferences weren't very well attended whatsoever. However, that wasn't the point. What they insinuate here is they would use conferences to build databases and get pictures and video and personal information on anybody who knew anything about this stuff. Now, that's kind of interesting too. Trusty Shellback says Bill Cooper was a Freemason, another hoaxer. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, well, I don't know if I mean, the thing is, his death seems a little shady, like a fake whistleblower being killed off. But he was also a false flagger. And anybody pushing false flags, I just find them to be questionable, and he may not have known, but if you're still pushing false flag theory, and this is what we're seeing here. So the false flag theories are just like the stories that these agents were using to convince this guy of this imminent alien invasion. They actually put out entertaining stories to lead people astray. So we have all these fake events left and right, and people are saying, well, the Jews did it. No, it was the Masons. No, it was the reptilians. Everybody's fighting over who did it or whose fault it was. Blame the liberals, blame the conservatives. We need a wall. They have all these different reasons for why such and such happened. But none of them will ever say nothing happened. It was all just theater, because that gives away the game. And the game here, the truth is, the mainstream media isn't actually out there documenting reality for your benefit. The mainstream media is out there conforming you to a very particular worldview. So there's an agenda beyond a bias here, and the agenda is keeping you completely disconnected from the real world by keeping you on the world stage. And the world stage is where most people exist. It's a real place. The world stage is the worldview you live in when you've accepted certain things, and it's very basic. If you accept the existence of certain narratives, in other words, if you don't question what you've been told, you're on the world stage. You believe there are a certain number of school shootings, terror attacks, you believe that certain threats exist, space rocks exist, that there are certain turmoils geopolitically to fear or expect things to happen from. You might actually fear North Korea. Like, that's all world stage stuff. And it's a reality augmentation. And so, those of us who choose not to have those augmentations are pretty much like atheists with relation to the believers. So, if you're an atheist and you've ever confronted or observed a group of religious fundamentalists, you think, wow, that looks like a bunch of mental patients. Like, they're extreme, they're dangerous, or they're just losing their minds. Well, you, the atheist, might actually be in such a system, and you can be activated when they play the right movies on that TV. Of course, they'll call it news. So you see kids running out of a school. It gives you a certain visceral reaction, and then there's a political agenda attached to it, which you will agree to. And the political footballs that they kick around with these psyops are not even what their real objective is. Like, they don't really want your guns. They use the fear of guns to justify drills and hardcore propaganda to condition the next generation to reject them. Breakaway Civilization says disinformation does not mean it's fake. Well, disinformation doesn't mean it's fake, but it means that it's not reliable. That's one thing it means. I mean, disinformation is where they add something into it to kind of muddy the waters. But the thing is, it's not even the information, but it's the interpretation that they have been misleading people with. So they don't care. The disinformation is basically a whole lot of stories, and they don't care which one you go with. But calling things fake is pretty much the one area where you're just not allowed to speak. Like, you're not allowed to have any sort of published content on any platform if you're a non believer. It's kind of trippy. Like, if I say, I don't believe 9/11 was real, people think I'm nuts. If I say, I don't believe the Holocaust is real, well, now I'm a Nazi and a hater. If I say I don't believe in dinosaurs, I'm a nut. It just depends on which particular sacred cow you're not believing in. And I call all of these things foundational myths. Like, I don't believe the space station is real. I think it's a total farce. And for that, some people will say you're crazy. But here's my question, and I've been trying to figure this out. Why is it a hate crime to not believe in one, while it's crazy to not believe in another, but not a hate crime? Like, you can't call me a bigot for not believing in the space station. You can't call me a racist for saying the moon landing was hoaxed. Although they have tried to cross these lines, Bill Nye was suggesting that people who don't believe in climate change are pretty much endangering their neighbors, so they all ought to be, one, checked out mentally, and two, possibly charged or fined if there is something. So the ocean levels rise, somebody's got to pay. The non believers. Jordan says nobody thinks Bill Cooper was a death faker. Yeah, I never even heard that. Generally, I don't. I don't flippantly throw stuff around like that. I don't use the F word flippantly. If I'm saying something is fake, I mean that it's a facsimile of the real thing. I don't mean it's just like in the mainstream media, they say fake news if they just don't agree with your opinion. No, I mean fake to mean in the sense of stagecraft, movie magic. Man got to the moon with movie magic, not with science. But one of the points I kicked on earlier, I really want to make sure that we recognize how important this one is. The space race is fake. The space race is a hoax. Forget the moon landing being a hoax. The space race and everything with it. Because people will say, well, they faked the moon landing to trick the Russians. So you can sound like a truther. You can sound like you're a whistleblower and you're trying to expose something by deconstructing the moon landing. But if your excuse at the end of the day for it is, well, they had to trick the Russians, you just preserved the narrative. So calling the moon landing a hoax is a guardrail. It's a guardrail that leaves you back to the mainstream. And that's why I call them guardrails. Guardrails will bounce you back. So you say, whoa, the moon's a hoax. So then you figure out, yeah, it is a hoax. But then what? Well, we had to beat the Russians, and now it's still America versus Russia. You've been guardrailed. The truth is, the space race is a hoax. You go over the guardrail and you recognize there never was a space race. Okay, and check this out. I've been saying this for a while here that they're drawing the lines in space because the next 9/11 is going to be a war in heaven. It's going to be a war to determine who controls heaven. And today's heaven is outer space. Will it be a commie heaven or a capitalist heaven where rich people like Bezos and Musk drag down trillions of dollars worth of platinum and nickel and whatever else and destabilize the world economies, allow people to pollute the earth more and ruin it even harder than we already are? So, this is a major point of contention. We have tree huggers. The tree hugger mentality has been transplanted to asteroid huggers, where they don't want us exploiting space. The fear of space junk ties into this because capitalism produces junk, and the more capitalists up there with their satellites, their CubeSats, and everything else, their mining equipment, the more junk there's going to be up there. So the war on free enterprise or capitalism or private property is still on. It's a culture war. And they've brought it into the space race. And it was very evident in this TV show on Netflix called Mars, where it's a documentary slash news broadcast. They don't tell you when it's news, when it's real. But it pretty much becomes a fable for if we allow them to drill on Mars, everybody's going to die. We can't turn Mars into Earth. If we go to Mars, it's to escape this place and to live green. Greening Mars and then not developing technologically. So, I've been looking at this how America is already a pariah with regards to how we treat the wrath of globe. Since we're the major polluter and we only make up, what, 5% of the world's population, it's pretty much clear that we're the problem. And so, are we going to Americanize space? Will the Chinese tolerate this? And I predicted this a couple years ago when they started throwing billions into the private sector for independent space programs and CubeSats to compete with Musk and Bezos in particular. So I'm like, wait, there's going to be a new war in heaven like 9/11 between the Western concept and the Islamic concept. It's a war over who has the dominant paradigm for where we all end up. And outer space has replaced heaven as this new point of contention, and it's the new turf, war fighting domain that we're going to be fighting over. So I've been predicting that since China and Russia have not signed into these outer space agreements about anti-satellite ballistics, it seems to me like they were kind of holding out because maybe later they wanted to, quote, win the space race. So the space race was really between what? The commies and the capitalists. I'm saying the space race is fake in reality, but I'm talking about in the world stage it was real, and we may or may not have faked the moon landing to win it. But now the space race is entering a new stage where we have all this unity with regards to the space station and where we're going, but America's still the major polluter and they're not going to stop. So now decisions have to be made. How do we progress forward? So my prediction was since Russia admitted to having kamikaze satellites, China has these other ones that can basically swallow up satellites. I thought maybe China and Russia might just take over outer space. And then there was something else where I think it was India had shot a satellite as just a test and put 400 pieces of debris in the path of the space station. Again, this has all happened in the last year. So in addition to a lot of occult meta-scripting, a lot of the Masony stuff, the very overt stuff has been saying, yeah, they're going to bring it down. The 33rd anniversary of the Challenger explosion is, this year. And so I've been waiting, and then this comes up today. China, Russia, Iran, Navy drills growing alliance. So it looks to me like the ones that I called out as probably going to be involved in the space war are actually here lining up. Just something to pay attention to. Because what I think will happen is a provocation that will bring about a new world war. That'll be a space based war. It'll happen in outer space, which is fake, and cyberspace, which will affect your internet connection. And it'll basically allow them to clamp down on the internet in order to keep us safe. Because trying to purge the internet of haters has always been a cover for just total control over the flow of information. And they've built up a lot of the infrastructure for that. So all we need is for Russia to shoot down the space station to trigger the whole thing. And then, of course, China will go swallow up our satellite systems. And then we have space wars where there's junk falling down. We have objects falling from the sky, space junk Armageddon. This is like basically what Werner von Braun talked about. But instead of UFOs invading us, maybe it'll be armies of drones from China. It doesn't have to be from extraterrestrials. That could have just been a metaphor or a way of saying it without saying it. So what I'm hoping for, and not hope, I'm doom hoping. I don't really want it to happen, but you know, I do hope they stick to the apparent script. And so here's the script. A few things about it. It has to do with this year. It was being basically suggested throughout the media that the space station would be falling. And I kind of want to go into this right now just because I think we're days away from it. But I have a few other things to do today, but I'll suffice it to say there were a lot of major events during the year that involved the space station overtly and covertly. And the number 33 was used so consistently in connection with this, and it ties into this 33-year-old who burned himself to death in front of the White House while wearing a USA shirt. That happened to be on the 33rd anniversary of the last time it happened, 86, which was the year the Challenger blew up. And there are so many threads connecting these things. So what I'm saying, that yes, it looks to me like the ISS falling might be the next 9/11. And it would also burn, which would be consistent with all of the other immolations from Yuri Gagarin to the 3 on the launch pad to the 7 in the Challenger. These are burnt offerings. And then one more thing, and this was kind of pointed out to me by a few people, and I was just, we're looking at the iconography of this thing and the symbolism of it all. And it is kind of curious how the solar array do somewhat resemble the World Trade Towers. That was something that a number of us had noticed when we started looking at this as a real possibility. John B. the One says ISS will disappear 33 years after its creation. Well, that's now. I mean, that's between now and January 28th. And that's why I'm bringing it up. I'm just bringing it up here. And let me go ahead and just give you an idea. I don't want to overwhelm you with this because this isn't a Kabbalah channel. I don't do numerology. I'm just pointing out what's in the headlines. And this is what I found this year, and it led me to conclude that there is a metascript, just as sure as every religious society that goes by a book that has a doomsday, it's a script that says this is going to happen. We're a part of this story. This is the beginning, and this is the end, and we're somewhere in the middle, closer to the end. It puts you in a story. That's the metascript. Well, the mainstream media is the Bible of the day, and it's the Bible for the entire world. And the same culture or entrenched elite, the oligarchs behind Mystery Babylon, are behind today's space program. They're behind today's mainstream media, which is its church. And they follow the same rituals, which do correspond to where we are in the year with the solstices and the equinox. And they follow the traditional pagan holidays. So, for example, I was talking about this earlier. For the last 3 winter solstices that I paid attention, there have been major UFO sightings corresponding, I'm contending, with the Christmas star. And these things are happening in conjunction with the solar phenomenon, with the celestial phenomenon. And this has been happening, you can go back for as long as they've practiced this. I mean, this is the the Pagan Rituals is a really good book I have on the topic, which I recommend because it goes into the history of witchcraft and how this is practiced in accordance with the seasons. And it references the where these traditions come from. It's called A Witch's Bible. And so I was reading about the solstice, and one of the things it was talking about was they do a ceremony that celebrates the transition from the old sun to the new sun. And this is symbolic of, like when you see Saturn devouring his child, all this symbolism we see plays out in the mainstream media now. I often reference how Darth Vader chopping the sword hand off Luke is symbolic of Saturn, with the devouring his child, Kronos, the skull face. This is you would call it polytheistic cult, but they put their rituals out there for everyone to see, knowing that most of you won't really know what you're seeing because we're not really meant to. But they played this stuff out on the solar holiday. So there's a new movie out called Skywalker Rising. Well, what is Skywalker? Well, Luke, light, Skywalker, the sun walks across the sky. Pretty easy symbolism there, fighting the Dark Father, Darth Vader. So, Rise of the Skywalker, it's just telling the same story. It's a new year. The sun just died, and the old one, the previous sun, has basically passed the torch. So, listen to this. Man, there's so much here. I wanted to talk specifically about the ISS. Here we go. During Holy Week, the cathedral burned in Notre Dame. As the cathedral burned, the steeple fell. The steeple is an obelisk and represents the same sun god and his eternal myth. So, this, of course, was represented at the Easter ceremony, when the sun god dies, the obelisk falling. While the sun god always has that part chopped off, this is also Luke with his sword head being chopped off. After which, Luke hangs from a cross, if you remember, in Cloud City. Hanging from a cross after having gone through the ritual dismemberment. This is ancient astrotheology imposed on your pop culture. So, the ISS was flying over the cathedral as it burned. And they said that even though it's burning, we can see the beehives on the roof have survived the fire. And this is where it gets kind of like into who's behind this, I think. Because when the thing was burning, the cathedral was burning, the space station was up there, and they said, we can see the three beehives on the roof. Well, each beehive was said to have 60,000 bees. So during the fire, a person dressed up as a Knight Templar was spotted in one of the towers. So you got a Knight Templar in a burning tower. The ISS is flying overhead, looking down, saying, your beehives are okay. So the fire can't be that bad. It's going to survive. So this just seemed like, a Holy Week miracle that the bees survived. Well, the significance of it is this. The Knights Templar were originally symbolized by the beehive, and they were the financiers of these cathedrals, like the one that was burning. And the Knights Templar were destroyed by the church. They were burned to death at the stake. And so the idea of them burning at the stake and then surviving by going underground and then coming back as the Masons, it's the story of the Phoenix. It may not even have happened. It might just be mythology. The idea of burning and then being reborn or coming back, it's part of this process. Same thing with the Osiris myth, the sun god dying and being reborn. This regeneration or recycling is part of this theme. So, this is what I'm saying. The phoenix is always born again in its own ashes. So, like I said, 33 years ago, a guy burned himself to death in front of the White House. And this year, another guy did it. And he's 33 years old. So, even, I know this is fake. I mean, TMZ reported it. And by the way, TMZ phonetically, Tamas, It's the Babylonian Christ. But they recorded this guy burning himself in front of the obelisk. You could see it in the background. And I'm like, wow, this 33-year-old's burning at the site of another guy who did it 33 years ago. This is exactly like the story of the Phoenix, where it, like I said, it dies and it's immediately reborn and it goes through the cycle. Well, the fact that it's wearing a USA shirt and it's burning tells me the symbolism here, Babylon burning. And what's more, there was a movie out this summer called Dark Phoenix, which made $33 million dollars when it opened. So the Dark Phoenix movie, making $33 million, dollars, is out during this time. And on its movie poster, it has the Challenger explosion. You know, the Challenger blew up 33 years ago? Well, you see the damn space shuttle on the movie poster Dark Phoenix, and this is when the city of Phoenix burns on the solstice. And then what's more about this TMZ thing, filming this guy burning in front of the obelisk, what's fascinating about this is for the last few years, they've been having this ceremony at the Washington Mall at the obelisk, and they call it catharsis, where they actually do a Burning Man. So the same month that a guy burned himself to death in front of the White House, they had an effigy of a man they torched in front of the obelisk. They do it every year. It's called catharsis. So again, during the summer solstice in Phoenix, Arizona, Phoenix, there's your Phoenix symbolism. On the 33rd parallel, Phoenix is partially evacuated because it burns. At the same time, there is a phoenix in the aurora borealis observed above a closed Russian military base. So there's another Russian connection to a burning phoenix, like the Challenger burning. 33 years since the Challenger's burned would be this year. So again, I'm like, wait, there's news reports of a big phoenix spotted in the aurora borealis in Russia at the same time that Phoenix is burning. And at the same time, there's a 33-year-old who just died by the name of Nipsey Hussle, who was being honored on the solstice by the BET, a big apotheosis ceremony, side by side with Freddie Mercury. The connection here, Freddie Mercury was brought up because one of his records was released, or a track was released that was in a vault. Now, the track was in a vault for, get this, 33 years, and it was called Time Waits for No One. And right when this track was released, it was noted that, hey, look, just as we enter into the solstice, the planet Mercury becomes highly visible in the sky by the sun. So there is this correspondence between what's happening in the celestial realm and what's happening in the news media with the celebrities, with the so-called news, and with the pop culture, like with the X-Men poster. And these things are all interconnected. I mean, it's not like we're reaching. Mercury on the solstice, 33, Phoenix burning. And of course, this is the year we have a Joker movie played by a guy with the last name Phoenix, which ties into this quite a lot as well. So, let's get back to the symbol of the space station. So, okay, so the space station is going over the burning cathedral, and they remark 60,000, 60,000, and 60,000 bees survived the fire. And of course, the Rolling 60s was brought up during Nipsey's whole ceremony, that whole pageantry. But the significance of the 360s would be the angles in the equilateral triangle, which the Templars and the Masons make a big deal about. I mean, this whole thing was very encoded, highly scripted. And another thing to bring out, when the cathedral was burning, it's Our Lady. Well, Our Lady in the in the mystery Babylonian uh, religion, that's the goddess Isis, Ishtar, Babylon. It's kind of interchangeable. Mary, and of course the burning is all symbolic. But again, the cathedral was burning, Babylon's burning, 33-year-old burning. All these allusions in the metascript to the number 33 and what happened 33 years ago. And then here's a few more things to throw onto it. At the actual Burning Man festival this year in Nevada, a 33-year-old guy died, and they had no explanation. It was like mysterious. And I'm like, okay, well, who didn't predict that? I mean, we had pretty much said something's up. And it turns out to be the 33rd and final Burning Man Festival. So there's a pattern here. And during that weekend, and I don't think this is even real, there was a boat off Santa Barbara where 33 people who burned to death weren't found. Like, their boat was called the Conception, and it was incinerated. See, Conception and the burning of the obelisk, the burning of um, the boat, this is all symbolic. The immolation, it's symbolic. And so calling it conception, well, we're talking about the ritual reincarnation ceremony, the conception of the sun god every day. The phoenix, it burns and then it's reborn. So every night the dead sun god goes through a conception. He reconceives himself, and then he's through his union with the night sky. I mean, this is being played out on so many fronts, and I just scratched the surface. I actually have an ebook out called Metascript that has pictures that shows how integrated this all is. And I didn't even get into the Christ archetype, who was symbolically killed on Easter in a very public way. But the main thing is this. So the cathedral is burning, Our Lady is burning, and I've already pointed out that Our Lady, the cathedral, it's also emblematic of the space station. Why? Because the space station, ISIS, or the ISS, phonetically similar, interesting, that's up there in the sky. So the rocket represents the earth god, and it goes from the ground to the sky. The sky goddess, that's why she's always got the blue robes with the stars. So the space station actually represents the goddess, and the night sky itself is the womb of Isis, where the god is conceived every day. In fact, if you look at the schematics to a SpaceX rocket launch, which I think sounds a lot like SpaceX, again, phonetically similar, they talk about, or they describe how the rocket deposits its load into space, into the once it deposits its load, and then the rockets come back down because they're reusable or whatever. But they use this word in this way of like depositing a payload. And what they're doing is they're ritualistically, symbolically inseminating the goddess. So the dead god, symbolized by the obelisk, can be reborn as the sun god the next day, as the Skywalker, as they call him in the movies. It's pageantry, it's a play, but it goes more with the ISS. There's a few other things here that I think are noteworthy. One of them being this idea that the goddess name Babylon burning, was a big theme. So, what would symbolize a dissolution of the world order into chaos more than the Tower of Babylon falling? And I say the space station is the Tower of Babylon. It's what unifies all nations into one cause to go from earth to heaven, speaking one common tongue, one common purpose. So I think that they built up this Tower of Babylon and they're going to burn it down. And by burning it down, well, if the space station falls, what do you think is going to happen to that big thing? The big jalopy. It's going to burn up, it's going to fall to pieces. It'll be spectacular. It'll be unifying and dividing at the same time. It'll be another 9/11. And look, metascripting wise, I've picked up a couple interesting little tidbits here. If you go to autohoax.com, you can follow along with some of the news stories we've deconstructed. So you had this Naval Air Station shooting on December 6th in Pensacola. And right after this event, like the day after, there was some type of cyber attack on the city, and their 311 was shut down. And of course, this event alluded to OBL, Osama bin Laden, alluded to Saudis, and then they were aviation students. I mean, where have you heard this before? Aviation students shouting Allah Akbar. So they basically invoked the specter of 9/11 and terror attacks into the minds of the people who were watching this story taking place at a naval base. So this story is being promulgated, and then they say, yeah, the guy's name is Muhammad, And next thing you know, their 311 gets shut down. So if you've been following any of our analysis of the metascripting, 311 and 11.3 or 113 have been popping up in a lot of stories having to do with this space war concept and EMP specifically, cyber attack specifically. So one of the things that I've pretty much, I think, ascertained from the scripting here is that should they bring us into a space war, yes, it's fake, but there will be tangible things. They are going to drop shit. Probably not on you, but in places where they have crisis actors already staged. Like when they brought down the Chinese space station, they had a state of emergency declared in several places. They had their Homeland Security and everyone in place. What does that really mean? We know it's a fake threat. It means that they're putting their actors in place. They're building the stage. And it's in the pop culture like crazy. All these different allusions to the space station falling. We'll do a separate issue. We'll do a separate live stream on this. I'm going to have to maybe play some of the earlier streams on this topic because yes, we've been following it for a while and it looks to me like it's scheduled to happen. Babylon's supposed to burn so that they can clamp down on this. They don't like the idea of a whole lot of people not believing in it anymore because this is the one world religion. Your mainstream media is it. People think it's science. They think the moon landing is science. It's not that it's fake, because it is fake, and the space race is fake. It's that it's basically high level witchcraft. I mean, I'm not into mumbo jumbo, but I know what it is. I mean, you're celebrating the fertility rites of the mystery schools that the elite practice, and they don't tell you this. I mean, that's all the space program actually boils down to. And the new age that they're moving you into is an age of, well, it's an age dedicated to Mars. It's the age of Mars. It's the age of feudalism. He's a war god, but it's also farming. But yes, the New Age movement is the worship of Horus. You can find this in all their literature. The one-eyed, symbol, the hawk. Well, Horus, the falcon rocket that's taking you to Mars. The Mars program is all cover, as environmentalism is a cover. Like, you should understand this. If you know already that environmentalism is a cover, a stalking horse for communism and the growth of government, well, then you should also know that the space program advances that even further. And that ultimately, what they have sold the masses is this glorified version of what outer space will be. And outer space, this vision that they've given us, is like the Jetsons, but it's actually communism. They just dressed it up really nice. Hey, if you haven't seen this, I wanted to make sure that none of you missed this. This is really good. Joe Rogan was looking at a couple of videos, and I have a compilation. I'm trying to get up all into one video here, but he was watching a rocket launch taking off, and he said, "Is that fake or real?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, it's real." And he says, "Why does it look fake? It looks like CGI." Then they changed the subject. So here Joe Rogan is looking at this image of a car, and he insists that the car is real. And they keep telling him, "No, Joe, that's a CGI rendering." So my point is this. I think the reason that people are so spellbound is that they've been rendered visually illiterate. And right now we're kind of undergoing something of a reformation. Unlike the previous one, it wasn't about literacy. I mean, that one is literacy. This one isn't about literacy. This one is more about can you visually read, like visual literacy. So you may think you can pick up, you can read Harry Potter, you can read all these dumb books they give you, but can you actually tell the difference between real and fake? And I'm saying that they intentionally made us visually illiterate so we wouldn't be able to. Listen to this.
They faked like they had like extensions.
Okay, so I don't want to disappoint you, but that is a rendering and not a picture of an actual car.
I don't want to disappoint you, Joe, but that is a rendering and not an actual space station. I don't want to disappoint you, but those aren't actual real dead kids. It was just a psyop. I mean, there are so many things that so many people are about to be disappointed in. If we succeed in this before they manage to shut down the internet.
Okay, so I don't want to disappoint you, but that is a rendering and not a picture of an actual car. Wow. As far as I know, the actual car does not exist. Good. And I think, if I had to guess, they put those over
That car doesn't exist. And this car looks realer than Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster in space.
fender lines on the rendering, so you would specifically notice that they have widened it.
That
And
could be.
if I
Yeah.
had to guess, the final car may not actually have a seat.
They haven't even built this car yet.
It looks amazing. Jamie.
And Joe Rogan is just blown away by it. And it's like, man, it's not even real. It's not even real. And you can see the shock though. And look, this is the cognitive dissonance that I've been waiting for. And I think this is going to happen on a mass scale, or it should, where people are going to have to come to terms with the fact that what they see in the movies looks way realer than what we're being shown on the news. And that really needs to sink in because why does reality, when presented by the news, whether it's the news on the ground or the deep space news, why does it look so fake and cartoony? Why is it so scripted? Why don't their actors ever cry or emote appropriately at all? What is with that? Well, we know the answer. Anyway, thanks for joining. I will see you all later. We'll be taking calls this evening. This is 33rd Degree.